Hello and welcome to Ask a CFO, the podcast series where I'm shining a light on the unique paths taken to become Chief Financial Officer, as well as exploring the deeply personal journeys of those that have made it to the top. In today's very special episode, I was lucky enough to be joined by Colleen Healy. Colleen I first met in Chicago just over 2 years ago, I believe, through the amazing George Zinn, who's a senior advisor to myself and to the company, and just a phenomenal friend of TT Group. Colleen has had an amazing career and a phenomenal journey. She's had over 25 years in finance. She had an illustrious career at Microsoft and has held a variety of CFO positions for both public and private companies. Her journey is one that I believe is defined by resilience, a determination, a curiosity, and also by immense empathy. She's an incredibly kind and considerate leader who eschews ego and pursues purpose, which is something I very much admire. She's now a board director, and I'm really looking forward to sharing her story with you all today. Thank you so much, Colleen, for being involved today. I wanted us to kind of take you back because you've had an illustrious career with many different chapters. So tell me, why did you decide that you liked finance? What were your early days kind of conceiving that you had a brain that was designed to do this job? How did it all start out for you?
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to share reflections. Finance for me did, I suppose, start early on. I always had a love for numbers. My father was really quite good at math, at doing math in his head and remembering figures and addresses and phone numbers. So I did love math. I loved the challenge. I found it really interesting. And the gateway to answer your question to finance for me was my first economics class at the University of Michigan. I was probably studying too hard for the exams, and a friend who was taking the class alongside me instead told me to just start charting out the problems on the graphs, and that the solutions would really reveal themselves as you graphed it out. And I enjoyed learning a new practical tool that could be leveraged in real time and on exams and really now in the world to solve real world problems. And so then after studying company valuations in a finance class down the road, I just became hooked. I loved the capital markets. I knew that I wanted to have a career that was really centered around that, at least in early days.
Amazing. And what a stroke of fate to be able to align like your natural kind of capabilities with a sense of purpose and curiosity. That's a rare kind of gem to be able to do those things, and you were off the mark doing that. I also love your friend at the University of Michigan saying this to you, because I had a mentor when I was running the business in Tokyo when I was very young, who said to me, you always work harder instead of working smarter. And so you had an early bit of guidance there that set you on a path that I think we all need to get better at, like certainly I do. So tell me a little bit, those early roles, what excited you most when you were starting out in your first kind of career path? And where were the learning curves for you, do you think?
Oh, so many. After graduating college, I went into investment banking as a young analyst in San Francisco, which was exciting, coming from the Midwest to be in what felt like the heart of it there. And investment banking was and is a very demanding role and sometimes difficult environments. And it was a learning curve that certainly required lots of hours. And I was fortunate that in my 2-year analyst stint, I had the privilege of working on a successful IPO, secondary offering, and 2 divestitures. So not only did the grunt work, but really got to do some incredibly interesting capital markets work, which is why I went into investment banking at that point in the first place. And at that point in my career, it was frankly amazing to see these tools of company valuation that I learned in school used to literally help price deals and IPOs. Seeing an IPO stock experience its first price tick while standing there on the exchange floor was incredibly exciting. And just being a part of teams advising clients on broad and diverse matters was incredibly informative for me at that point and exciting. I knew I didn't want to be an investment banker in the long term, even though I found capital markets to be very exciting. And while my investment banking analyst at the end of our 2-year program pursued MBAs, I decided to go and pursue Microsoft. And that was incredibly fortuitous. I wanted to be at the epicenter of a company on the cusp of releasing Windows 95 back when people lined up at stores to buy PC operating systems. It turned out to be right at the internet wave coming, so could not have timed it better. I joined Microsoft as one of 3 people working in its then forming corporate development and mergers and acquisitions group. Hard to imagine Microsoft at a point where it did not have a formal group. But that, just the change in the industry. So it's greenfield work for the company. And to your point, a learning curve, not only for me, but for the company at that point in the mid-90s. And just an incredible experience. I was a young person that was able to regularly present to the CEO founder, Bill Gates, at that point. Any deal over $3 million required a review. So what a great opportunity for me. I was so early in career, I didn't even know I was probably supposed to be nervous. But I was also surrounded by a great group of people who were incredibly supportive. I feel very fortunate that I learned from the deal greats like Greg Maffei and Greg Stanger and David Wren, who were kicking off that corporate development group as well. And after that, I was fortunate to go into Treasury and work for the then Assistant Treasurer, George Zinn. He had me run a $12 billion portfolio on a capital markets desk and surrounded me with a great team to lead and to learn from. And that's really where mentorship for me became very ingrained. I mean, George modeled what great mentorship looks like. And I learned a ton from George, and I continue to do that through this day. So just a great starting base at Microsoft, really broad 19-year career there with lots of different opportunities of intellectual property and heading up investor relations, and then pivoting to be a general manager of $1 billion business. Just very, very fortunate to have those great, meaty learning curves. And without that diversity of experiences, I'm not sure I would have had the tools to become the strategic CFO that I wanted to be down the line.
How amazing. I want to kind of take us back to the start of your journey there when you were talking about your learning curves, because I can see some common threads that I would say make you well disposed to that role of CFO. So curiosity and a passion for learning, and also this kind of desire to be connected to the bigger picture and see what the whole company's doing. And I think that is really a drive that you have to have if you want to get to that level. Then you've got to be able to pitch, for example, sometimes to be able to see how this is all connecting. And I think that's something that sort of marks you out. You've mentioned George, who, yes, we owe such a debt of gratitude to George. First, for this interview, because I know you through George. And secondly, because George, in fact, brought me into contact with my first big CFO, and it was Amy Hood at Microsoft as well, when they hosted us for our Women in Treasury installation in Seattle, which was for me just so the pinnacle of my career then. And it was so exciting to be with that community there and see their commitment to equity. So I really, shout out to George. I want to come back to when you were making that decision to go to Microsoft, how intentional was that decision for you? Were you really thinking, okay, what's on the up? What's an exciting company? Or did it kind of come to you? Because sometimes our career opportunities kind of come to us and sometimes we have to seek them out. So how much intention was there behind that choice?
Well, in this case, very intentional. I'd like to tell you, every move that I've made has been intentional, sometimes not. But in this case, it was very intentional. My colleagues at the end of the 2-year program in investment banking were going off and getting MBAs. And I really did have interest in going into strategic planning or corporate development in a fast growing tech company. And with a stroke of luck, I was out in New York. I was actually recruiting for the next class of analysts to come into Credit Suisse, which is the investment bank where I was working. And I decided to take that opportunity to meet with recruiters. And I met with Nina Swift of the Oxbridge Group. And I told her, hey, I know that what you recruit for tends to be more hedge funds and private equity, at least back then. And I said, but frankly, that's really not what I want to do. I want to do strategic planning or corporate development for a tech company. And she was very generous. She was not recruiting for Microsoft, but she made an introduction. And I got into this then forming mergers and acquisitions group. So sometimes you put it out there and you take some risk, you get off a track that is, frankly, tried and true and a great track to get your MBA and carry on with that path. But, my MBA was an incredible education at Microsoft.
Amazing. I'm really glad I asked a bit more about that, because I think often we sort of expect that things will just happen if you work hard enough, but it's actually, you need to decide where it is you're aiming for. And then you need to be bold enough and confident enough to put it out there. Because as you say, even if it's not the perfect moment or the perfect person, once people know where you're aiming for, they'll help you and you can kind of get your name out there as that's what I want to do. So thank you so much for sharing that.
That is so well said. And there's multiple ways to get to an endpoint. If you miss an entrance at this point in time, there's another way to get to the outcomes that you want. But yeah, sometimes the irony to your point is you don't stay on the defined path because it's not the path for you. You'll define your own path or a different path.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sometimes, if we come from different kind of academic backgrounds, maybe you don't have the criteria that sets you on the straight path. Sometimes you can think, oh, well, that's not going to work out for me. But if you consistently line it up, you have the right energy and you create the right environment around you with people who know what you're trying to achieve, you'd be amazed how many doors can open. So as you know, they say fortune favors the bold. And I think that's really true. Like, no one's coming to give you your career. And equally, you don't have to just stick in the lane that you've been assigned to. So I think that's great advice. I want to come back now. You mentioned those learning curves and how they set you up to be ready for that strategic CFO role. So tell me about stepping into the role. What attracted you to it and what was it like when you arrived?
I am drawn towards broad strategic roles. So even when we go through sort of my career path, I think especially early in career, a good, broad, diverse role, whether it's investment banking or consulting or rotational programs at world-class companies. I'm just naturally drawn towards roles that tend to be more broad, and you're seeing a diversity of situations where there's a current state today and there's a desired state tomorrow, and it's these strategic elements that bridge that gap so you can get to that desired state. And I happen to do it in a way that's very informed by numbers, like most finance folks, I'm sure do. And so I like strategic CFO roles where you're partnering with the CEO and the business to drive strategy and execute against plan. Finance in these situations oftentimes has a very unique role at the table to bring the numbers to bear, for the insights to optimize the decision making with confidence as part of the larger team. And I like to go after audacious goals on teams that are very mission driven. So for me, the CFO role has allowed me to bring it all together in that very, very basic accounting, not great accounting, but very basic accounting can be backwards focused on income statement results, and very basic FP&A, not great FP&A, can be very forward focused, again, on income statement. And treasury, in a way, can be FP&A bringing the balance sheet in. The CFO role is looking backwards, forwards, and at all the financial statements, which great accounting, great FP&A, and great treasury doing the same thing. So the leader of those orgs with the CFO role certainly needs to be doing that. I have found the role to be really a very interesting one, very strategic. I love dealing with investors, capital markets, and being informed by the numbers. So the breadth, the depth, the type of teamwork and development required to be an effective CFO, or frankly, really to be an effective leader in anything, makes that role really exciting, because it is a unique role led by the numbers and great teams.
Amazing. And you mentioned there's something that's come out throughout our conversation, but also that I've noticed with every successful CFO that I've spoken to for the series, which is that diversity of experience early on, setting you up pretty well then. And Eric Ball, who I also interviewed for the series, mentioned that there are moments in your career when you need to be a generalist, and there are moments when you need to be a specialist. So knowing when you want breadth of experience and when you want depth of experience, I think is critical too. You also mentioned this word that I love, being audacious. And I think I noticed that as a common thread in your career as well, being brave and bold and going for what you desire. So thank you so much for that. I want us to move now to think about the kind of nuances of working in different sectors, if and indeed how these can affect the CFO function itself. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm a big believer that finance skills are transferable across industries if you possess that growth mindset and intellectual curiosity that we've talked about. Being a flexible learner is required in the role, but it also naturally, I think, positions the role to be a cross-functional role. I was a part of lots of change over the course of my career. And with digital transformations that happen, you think about those happening in technology, perhaps first, whether that's the internet or the consumerization of IT, or going from on-prem software to the cloud, now with machine learning and AI. But these technical shifts happen across industries. And, where I'm spending my time today is really in the industrial space as a board member. And the reason why I feel like I can offer value on some of the strategy issues is because we're looking at technical shifts that go now through various industries. I was fortunate that I was able to serve as CFO in health tech, ad tech, and cybersecurity. And to hit on your theme, Sophie, which I think is right on, you gave it a great name in terms of these diversity of experiences. But when you're in different industries, you're seeing a lot of different business models, different go-to-market motions, different licensing agreements. And I think that really keeps one engaged. It requires you keep remembering the growth and flexible learner mindset. It also, if you're going after these audacious goals, is a great galvanizing bonding functions to work as a team. And so I think that goes across any industry, and finance has got to be, in my opinion, one of the most transferable skills across industries.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think you make some amazing points there. I mean, as you say, you've got bonds with members of your team that continue to this day. Like, you've worked with George. I'm sure there's many others that I don't know who you continue to have a very active relationship with. And I think those are also what give us a sense of fulfillment from work as well, because we're not just here to get to the top job. We're also here to achieve our purpose and to feel aligned with our curiosity and our vision. And a shared goal being achieved is so much more powerful than an individual, I think, and it must be phenomenal. I'm struck in your kind of outline of your career, how you've really been at the epicenter of some of the most exciting industries at the right moment, including now with your board role. So, I mean, kudos to you for knowing the right moment to be in those industries, because it must be so exciting to be at them all as they're reaching this kind of very accelerated growth and having a lot of impact on the world, to be perfectly honest with you. So that must be quite an amazing thing to look back on.
I feel incredibly fortunate in some of the rooms that I've been able to be in at the times that I've been able to be in them. And also, you alluded to, Sophie, that going through these shared experiences and working as a team, I feel so blessed that there's a core group of people that I don't make a move in my career without talking to them about it. And it's because they're, one, great people, they're generous people. And two, you've gone through shared experiences that over the long term certainly have created value. And, you've been a part of teams, and that bond goes across company and outside of companies. And that's really, I think, what makes work have that emotional connection for me anyways.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that network that you have is part of what makes you unique, and being able to harness it at certain moments. So we're sitting talking together the day after a big inauguration in the US, and I spent last night on the phone to several of my personal advisors trying to understand, what this means. And without those people, I really would not have the ability to be as fast moving, as confident in making decisions for our business. So I think that cannot be underestimated. It's something that people should be working on from the beginning. I tend to kind of cling on to people as a character trait, if I find them inspiring. And it wasn't intentional as building a network at the time. But now it is so coming back to just give me such a breadth of intellectual wisdom from people with far more experience than me. And I think that's something that people often neglect to focus on until it's a bit too late. We can't activate a network that's been lying dormant or that doesn't exist. So I think making sure that we put as much effort into those relationships as possible is critical.
I totally agree with that. I have a dear friend of mine who sort of jokingly says, you're really good at crowdsourcing. I don't hesitate to pick up the phone. And I try to model you and George and so forth, that when the phone is also incoming for people who are maybe earlier in career or peers or whatever that are dealing with an issue, that giving back, there's moments, to your point, you said, Eric said, sometimes to be a generalist, sometimes to be a specialist. I think in mentorship, there's a time to take and there's a time to give. And that's what makes the world go round.
Absolutely. And I've also, I don't know if you found this, but my early career, I worked in fashion publishing and it was pretty brutal. And so I found a lot of healing in taking what I've learned from all these amazing people I've met as I've got older and the advice they've given me on career progression, and allowing someone else to cut out those 5 years of horribleness in your early 20s. And it's really has made me feel healed, because you think, well, they're not going to have to go through that. They're going to know all these tricks straight away, and they'll know when an organization is not serving you, and they'll know how to get out. And that actually for me has made me feel a more full person, because you find those experiences weren't for nothing. They're actually going towards a greater good, and they're building a future that's better for people. So I think that's also a part of why giving back is so important.
Isn't it great to figure out where you belong, what environments are nurturing for you, and the kinds of people you want to be associated with? And sometimes you do have to pay, I'm going to call it your dues, earlier in career, so that later in career, if you're fortunate, you get to start making those choices. Which teams do I want to be part of who do I want to work with, who don't I want to work with. So
Yes.
I share that gratitude with you that, we're at that point in our careers.
Yeah, and when you think about leaders that you've been around, I mean, I think knowing what you don't want to be is just as important as what you do want to be. And it's very good to understanding every role serves a purpose, even if it's just to show you the kind of environments that aren't serving you. So I think, yeah, all experiences I see as helpful. I want to come to the actual role of CFO because it's one that's, changing rapidly as everyone's roles are and everyone's industries. How have you seen the role evolve over time, and what skills would you say are necessary now to become a leading modern CFO?
The CFO role today is broader and more strategic than ever. It requires this ability to go deep, or what we talked about, maybe to specialize for a moment in time, at least on something that might be before you. But it also requires CFOs to be generalists too. They're chief culture managers, they're chief strategy leaders from the finance org around these tables. So I think it's evolving in a way that makes the role more demanding, but a lot more fun. I think finance's goal back from when I started working was always about, how can you be a strategic partner to the business? Well, finance now is a part of the business. So how can you be a strategic leader around the tables with the other functions from around the business to have these great outcomes? So I think it's never been a more exciting time, and never a time where having these broad and diverse experiences, not just from traditional finance roles, but maybe some non-traditional roles from being in the business, whether that's leading a go-to-market or leading sales operations or looking at the business from lots of different angles, so that when you are in that CFO seat, you have a good view, not only of the business, but you've seen things from different sides so that you can be helpful to the people who are leading various functions and to be great together.
Yeah, and I think that's the moment, isn't it, when the curiosity that's kind of perpetuates your whole career comes back to serve you, when it is your job to connect everything and to harness your skills as a finance leader to bring it all together. So I think that's such a great point to make. You have had an enviable position, I'd say, after CFO, in that you've kind of been able to pick and choose the roles that you want to take. You've got a number of board roles and you've done some really exciting things. So what are the learning curves on the journey from CFO onwards? Because I feel like that intentionality continues today in how you're able to kind of select what you're wanting to invest your time and energies towards.
I had hoped that in my post-operating career that I could serve as a board director. And I am lucky that the body of my work and quite a bit of luck of having it all come together did enable me to become a board member of a public company a couple of years ago. And this first board role has been absolutely incredible. It's really been what right looks like. And the space is going through a digital transformation and Internet of Things, as I alluded previously. And so it's been a wonderful match to both learn good board practices early in my board journey and also to add value as a part of that board. And, going forward, I'd love to add a pure play tech company, right in the heart of data and analytics and the enterprise, where I've spent most of my career. But the funny thing about board work, with boards, they say it's nose in, fingers out. But, just as strategic, just as interesting. And I guess I'm going to hit my broad and diverse theme again here. But I do think as a board member, if you're on 1, 2, 3 boards, I do think that helps to ensure that you're going to have a good, broad, relevant, up-to-date view of the world. And I think that really adds to great board members, in terms of what I see in the boardroom here.
Yeah, I think it sounds so fantastic to be able to be there at a company's moments when it's going through challenges and growing, but without having to do the kind of founder or CEO work of day to day, because you can get so bogged down in your individual company that I think this idea of the next chapter of one's career being about using what you're best at to help those companies achieve their goals, but then being able to step back and be objective and go and look at other organizations just sounds phenomenally fulfilling, and also great for finally being able to balance other passions that we have in life with working so hard and being at the helm of great organizations.
All those things. And I feel so grateful to be part of that group and adding to and learning from.
Fantastic. So what advice would you give to those who are either just beginning their careers, thinking about beginning their careers, or who are in the midst of their careers and aspiring to become a future CFO?
Again, I love this mission of yours to help the community and to help increasing diversity in these roles. I humbly give the following advice. First, take care of the job you have and be great at it. Leave things better than you found them. That takes patience to be great in what you're doing today. And then while still in role, taking a lateral approach to make others that you're working with or working alongside across the company better. So again, this theme of use the role to get good, but then also give back. Make sure you're leaving it and the people around you in a better state than you found it. 2 is to take stretch assignments. While in your current role or your next role, be fearless, be audacious, which is going to be my third piece of advice. Without risk, there's no reward. Risk management is not about eliminating risk. It's about taking smart risk and then managing the risk. So try on different finance and accounting roles in the office of the CFO, but also outside of the office of the CFO, if that's what interests you, so that you can bring, a full view to your roles today and then to your CFO role in the future. And then my fourth and final piece of advice will be also a theme of what we've talked about, which is forming great relationships, identifying mentors, and identifying who you can be helpful to mentor. We always have someone ahead of us. We always have someone coming up behind us. And what a great opportunity to form those relationships, both through team wins and teamwork, but also through mentorship.
Amazing. Thank you so much for such an amazing conversation. I think if I could just sort of summarize how I would kind of define your energy to your whole career from this, it would be that theme of being audacious and fearless. But at the same time, one thing I really value about you is that you're very humble, and not humble in like an unassuming way or one that neglects to be proud of your achievements, but one in which means leaving your ego at the door. Because I think sometimes people get advice to, be bolshy and go for it. But if your ego is alongside that on that journey, then it can become a bit of an unstoppable negative pool of energy, and you're not that pleasant to be around or to be led by. So I think those two things together are just like a dynamite combination of being fearless whilst also not letting your ego drive your decisions.
Oh, that's so incredibly kind. Thank you for that. And thank you too for having me on the podcast to share some of my experiences and frankly, good fortune. And thanks to you for all the work that you're doing in the community, Sophie.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Colleen. And for anyone listening and they want some help with more connections or advice further on that, then you can reach out to us at the Treasury Today group, because we're more than happy to make mentor and mentee connections where we can. But thank you ever so much. I've loved it. I loved it when we first met and I got to speak with you.
Thank you, Sophie. I appreciate it.
I can't wait to see where Colleen and I will meet next and where we can next catch up. And I hope you will enjoy today's episode. Thank you.